had done in class. And let me just go over it. So this on the right side, I know it's not, but I want you to imagine as that as the real Utah, right? The state of Utah, and where this edge here is 350 miles. This one is 270 miles. Going up here is 280. Well, 280 is from here actually to here, right? And then 160, 160 miles from here to here. So that's the real Utah, right? With the actual distances. And then we were asked to do a scale drawing of Utah in our notebooks. And obviously, we used a scale, and the scale, we had to find the scale. So let's see if we can find the scale. So to the scale, what scale did um, whoever made the scale drawing use? Well, let's take two corresponding sides. Let's take the easiest one. So let's take this guy here. Oops. Let's take this side, right? Let's take this side, the corresponding side that represents the real distance, right? So in our notebook, that is represented by 7 centimeters. And in real life, that 7 centimeters represents 350 miles. All right, and I'm going to change that scale there, and I'm going to make it into a unit rate, so that we're comparing based on 1 centimeter. So I know 7 centimeters in our notebook here represents 350 miles in real life, but I want to know what 1 centimeter, because having the unit rate just makes life so much easier. So how you can cross multiply, but this is simple enough. How did the 7 become a 1? We know we can divide by 7, right? So to find the equivalent ratio, and then 350, we're also going to divide by 7, and that gives us 50 miles. So the scale, so if this was a map, right, this one, the one that we did, we would have something at the bottom that says, hey, you know what? We made a little drawing of Utah, and the scale that we used was 1 centimeter in our drawing represents 50 miles. And somebody could check our work and say, really? Let's see if they did it correctly. So let's take the bottom part here. Let me take the bottom part here. Right, in our notebook, right, the southern part of Utah, southern edge of Utah, is 5.4 centimeters, and in real life is 270. So let's see if we used the scale correctly. Well, so we know that 1 centimeter is 50 miles, right? And then on the other side, let's double check. Let's check that 5.4 centimeters. So using this scale, this ratio, we're saying that 5.4 centimeter represents 270 miles, right? So just to check, to see if we're correct, what can we do here? Well, we can ask ourselves, right, 1 times what's 5.4 is 5.4. What have I? So therefore, if I multiply 50 times 5.4, will I get 270? Well, let's just do that quickly. So we get 0, 20 goes 2. Yeah, we do. Look, 270. So you know those two are equivalent ratios. Is there a different way we could have done that? We could have cross multiplied. 1 times 270 is 270, and we just found out that 50 times 5.4 is 270, right? So they're equal to each other. So that's another way of proving that these two ratios are equivalent. So now we know that when we did our work here, we used the scale correctly. So what I asked you to do, and we did scale A, so I asked you to do scale D, right? We're going to draw Utah again, but this time I want you to use the scale 1 centimeter to 100 meters, 100 miles. So let's start with this guy. Let's start with this section right here, right? The western side of Utah. In real life, it's 350, but using our scale, we want to make a little drawing here, right? And we're going to use a scale 1 centimeter to 100 miles. So let's start with that. So 1 centimeter, 100 miles, and then centimeters on top, miles at the bottom, and we want to know this guy, right? So if I have 350 miles, how many centimeters will that correspond to? Well, x, we can cross multiply 100 times x. It's under x. 1 times 350 is 350. Divide by 100. Divide by 100. So x equals 3.5 centimeters. So if I were to take the western side of Utah, right, the western edge here, I'm going to use a ruler. Well, I'm not going to use a ruler. I'm going to pretend I'm going to use a ruler, right? And I'm going to use 3.5. So in your notebook or your sheet, wherever you're doing this, you would measure 3.5 centimeters, and that would represent that western edge of Utah. And now it's rinse and repeat. So let's do this bottom part now. Change it to different colors. Right, let's do 270 miles. What does 270 miles become using scale of 1 centimeter to 100 miles? So again, 1 centimeter, 100 miles. On the other side, centimeters in miles, right? We're trying to find out what 270 miles is in centimeters, right? How many centimeters? X, cross multiply, and I hope you see a pattern here. Oh, it's going to be x times 100, which is 100x, and that equals 270. We're going to divide by 100 like we did the previous one, divide by 100, and x equals 2.7. So this, the southern part of Utah, which is 270 miles in real life, but in our notebook, when we draw it, we're going to say, hey, this is 2.7 centimeters. So that's done. All right, so now we're going to take and do this, right? The western edge, the western side of Utah, which measures 280 miles, but what does that equal in centimeters? So again, if you cross multiply, I'll do it one more time. So again, 1 centimeter is 100 miles, and then centimeters and miles, and then here we are going to write 280 miles. I know 1 centimeter is 100 miles. I need to know how many centimeters equals 280 miles. Again, x, cross multiply, we got 100x equals 280, and like I said, notice that we're dividing the miles by 100 to get the corresponding sign centimeters, which in this case 2.8. So going up here, this section here, right, is going to be, let me change colors. It's going to be, so we're going to go up, and that's 2.8 centimeters. So notice, I'm going to make a comment, the scale that we used earlier in class today, the scale was 1 centimeter, and I believe it was 50 miles, right? The one that we used to create this. Notice the difference, right? So when the scale was 1 to 50 miles, notice that this was 7 centimeters, right? Right? This side that measures 350 miles in real life, using the scale that we used in class, it became centimeters. Now notice what happens when I make that scale a little bigger, right? When I use 1 centimeter is 100 miles. Oh, our measurements, the corresponding side in centimeters becomes a little smaller. Okay, so it's interesting to see what happens when you use different scales. So let me try. Let's do this top part here. Right. So and again, now that we've done 3, you know that eventually we're going to do 160. We're going to divide by 100. So x is going to be 160 divided by 100. It's going to give us 1.6. I'm just being lazy here. So this stretch right here is 1.6. Okay. And then we have to do this part that's coming down here. Let me pick color here. The part coming down, which is 70. So if you do x equals 70 divided by 100, you're going to get that this part coming down is 0.7 centimeters. And lastly, this part right here, which is represented by 110. So the quick shortcut is just do 110 divided by 100, right? And x equals 1.1 centimeters. So this part right here becomes 1 centimeter. So that's what your drawing would look like with a scale, right, of 1 to 100 miles. Okay. I will do one more. God knows if anybody's still going to be watching, but let me change this. Let me tell you that this is the scale D, right? 1 centimeter is 100 miles. Let me do this one here, scale A. Did we do scale A in class? I think we did, no? I think we did, so I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to mention something here. Look at scale B. Right? Scale B says 2 centimeters. So scale B, 2 centimeters is correspond to 7 miles. Now I want you to compare that with scale A, where scale A says 1 centimeter is 35 miles. Let's simplify this. Scale B. So instead of 2 centimeters, we write 1 centimeter. How do the two become 1? We can divide by 2. If I repeat the process at the bottom, 7 divided by 2 is 35 miles. So notice that scale A and scale B is exactly the same. They're both equivalent ratios. Right? And what's the difference? Well, the difference is if you use scale B, you're going to have an extra step to do. Let me show you the difference. So let me keep that and keep that. Okay, this is scale B. Let's do, and I'll show you what happens when you do a proportion here. This is scale B, and this is scale A. And I'm going to erase this because we don't need it anymore. And let me do 350. What is 350 miles in centimeters using this scale here? So if I were to do that, centimeters on top, miles at the bottom, and we want to change 350 miles to centimeters. So 350 miles, x, and then let me do the same thing at the bottom. We already know that these two scales are exactly the same, but what is there any difference as to if you choose one over the other? Well, let's cross multiply. If I cross multiply here, I get 2 times 350, which is 700, and then I get x times 70, which is 70x. And then at the bottom here, I get 1 times 350, which is 350, and then x times 35 is 35x. Divide by 70, divide by 70. We have a calculator, so 70 simplified to 1, x equals 100. Divide by 35, divide by 35. I forgot you have a calculator, so x equals 10. Sorry, not 100, should be 10 centimeters. And the bottom should be 10. Okay. Now, that's that. There's really not much else.